A warm welcome to all the viewers. I am going to talk about something which is quite special for all of you. Yes, especially for the beginners. You must have heard the terms structural equation modeling, outer model, inner model, measurement model, structural model. So I am going to simplify all these terms for you so that you understand them well and you can use them while writing an article. It's especially seen that when you are a beginner in research, then you struggle to understand the meaning of these important terms, which are an essence, which are a building block for a good article, for a good dissertation, or a good thesis. Because whatever analysis we do, especially in social sciences, we are using the foundation of structural equation modeling, which is a form of regression wherein you have multiple independent variables and multiple dependent variables. So you can analyze them together in a single model, which is known as structural equation modeling. So how to do that? I'll explain to you in a very simple language so that you never forget it, and do share it with your friends and faculty colleagues. Now, structural equation modeling has two parts. The first is measurement model assessment. In measurement model assessment, we are seeing what is the reliability and what is the validity of our scale. By scale, I mean the measuring instrument, the survey questionnaire. So the survey questionnaire has certain variables which may be measured by you on a Likert 5-point scale, a Likert 6-point scale, a Likert 7-point scale. These are the generally used scales in social sciences. So there can be different variables which are known as latent variables, which are a part of your model. These latent variables are generally unobserved variables. So how do we get the quantification of these latent variables, the value of these latent variables? Each latent variable has certain indicators or items to measure that latent variable. So to numerically measure that latent variable, you need certain items which are known as indicators or observed variables. So if, say for an example, you are asking about customer experience. So customer experience is your variable, that is latent variable, which will consist of 3, 4, 5 or n number of statements which you want to include, which describe the customer experience. And they could be reflective or formative in nature. Reflective means they convey the same meaning, but asked in different language. Formative means they all convey different meanings. The first step in measurement model assessment is checking on the factor loadings. So in case the constructs or the latent variables are having reflective indicators, you check on factor loadings. In case you have formative indicators and there is a formative latent variable, you check on outer weights. So you check on the outer weight significance, but for a reflective indicator you check the factor loadings, which is prescribed to be at least 0.7. But still, sometimes researchers accept the thresholds of 0.5. It should not be less than 0.5. So if it is not 0.7, at least 0.6. And those items of that latent variable, the reflective items of that latent variable which possess a factor loading of less than 0.6, you can go ahead and remove them, so that later on there is no problem with the convergent validity, the average variance extracted. So the average variance extracted for each latent variable should be at least 0.5. So that has to be established. For outer weights, they should be significant. If you have formative indicators, as I told you, you check on outer weights, you don't check on factor loadings. So, if they are significant, well to do. If they are not significant, then the second step is checking on the factor loadings. So, if the factor loading is 0.5, then you don't go ahead removing that formative indicator, because that formative indicator is assessing a different meaning for the latent formative construct. As I told you that each indicator in a formative construct conveys a different meaning. So it would not be wise to remove it unless the factor loading of that is also below 0.5. And when you conduct structural equation modeling, first you have to assess the reliability and validity of these scale, the Likert scale variables, which is assessed through Cronbach alpha, composite reliability, and validity is of two types: convergent validity and discriminant validity. Convergent means how well these indicators come together to explain the variance in the latent variable which they are forming. So it is measured through AVE, which is average variance extracted. You get these all calculations easily through the softwares in amos, or if you have a formative model, you get it in smartpls. You just have to interpret them. The threshold for AVE is a minimum of 0.5. Now, discriminant validity means all these indicators which define a latent variable, define the meaning of the latent variable, each latent variable. So, how well they distinguish themselves from the indicators of second latent variable or third latent variable in your model. That is discriminant validity. You assess it through two different methods which are generally used. The first is Fornell and Larker criteria, and the second is heterotrait monotrait ratio, HTMT values. Again, you get them easily through tables in amos and smartpls as well, or any of the softwares for that matter. You don't need to calculate them manually. Once you have assessed the reliability and validity, then you move on to structural model analysis. That is the second part of structural equation modeling. First is measurement model assessment, second is structural model assessment. In structural model assessment, you try to assess the relationship between the different variables, the latent variables. Now, the composite scores of the latent variables, which are calculated by you as an arithmetic mean, or which are calculated by the software, in PLS especially, you get the latent variable score. Now, these are used by the system to find out the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. And that is the goal of your study. You want to assess whether the independent variable has a significant influence on the dependent variable or not. So if the p-value is significant, that is less than 0.05, you reject the null hypothesis. So if you reject the null hypothesis, you go with the alternate hypothesis. That is something which you want to state as a finding in your study. So now your data analysis is done. So structural analysis is the second part of structural equation modeling. Both of these things, the measurement model assessment and the structural model assessment, can be easily done if you know what type of constructs you have, what type of latent variables you have. Sometimes we call them constructs, sometimes we call them latent variables. These are unobserved constructs, as I explained to you. So I hope now it has become quite clear to you that what are these terms, how to use them. There are videos on the channel. You might like to go into the playlist of research methodology and analysis and look into the videos on practical aspects of conducting measurement model assessment and structural model assessment in amos and smartpls. I hope this interactive session with you guys was quite informative and useful for you, and you will definitely share it with your friends and faculty colleagues. Keep supporting the channel, and there will be more informative content in coming time for all of you. Thanks a lot.